chapter director at, got it, at C2 Education. C2 has students who come for different academic support. So SAT, ACT, now digital SAT, college essay. But today we're going to specifically be talking about the digital SAT and the changes on the test. So this is just an outline of what we're going to speak about today. So in terms of the digital SAT, we're going to discuss the structure of the test and the timelines. We're going to talk about what's changing and what's staying the same, who should prepare for the digital SAT, a little bit about how C2 is addressing the digital SAT as well. So what is the digital SAT? The last paper pencil SAT was actually in December. So the first digital SAT is going to be in March. There is no more paper pencil. Now the new test will be digital only, of course. It will be adaptive, and we're going to talk more in depth about what that means in the presentation. And the new test will be more secure, meaning that as the students are taking it, is secure on the device they are using. So students may not take paper pencil without accommodations. It's only delivered at the testing center of the schools. Students will use their own devices issued by their school, and students cannot take the test home or take the test at home. So it's still the students are going to a testing site, which is a local school, to take their digital test. So now over here, we're talking more about the adaptive nature of the test. There are going to be two sections on the digital SAT, reading and writing, as well as math. Now, each section will have two modules. The difficulty of the second module will be based on the student's performance in Module 1. If you take a look at this chart, Module 1 has a mix of difficulties. All students have the same content, but now how they perform determines which Module 2 that they see. So the Module 2 medium hard, students who place into this module can achieve an 800 section score, so a perfect section score. Whereas Module 2 students will have a lower possible maximum score. So again, it's called a multi-stage adaptive test. And this makes Module 1 extremely important because how the student does on Module 1 does determine if they get the medium hard Module 2 or easy medium Module 2. So because it's digital and adaptive, a passage or word problem is unique to each question, meaning instead of a longer passage like the traditional paper pencil SAT, you're going to have a shorter passage and then a question, a short passage and then a question. As a result as well, the test is about 45 minutes shorter. Scores will be available in days instead of weeks, which is great. And the test will be personalized based on the student's performance. And we talked about on the last slide, the adaptive nature of the test. So now we'll talk a little bit about the test structure itself and the timeline. If you take a look here, okay. So we've got the test structure. Modules, we've got two modules, reading and writing are combined. There are 22 questions in the math module. There are 27 questions in the reading, writing. Now, time per module, 35 minutes for math, 32 minutes reading, writing. On the math, there are 4 option multiple choice type questions like before. Student-generated response is like on the paper pencil SAT where the student would fill in like the grid-in questions, fill in their answer. Now on the reading writing, there are 4 option multiple choice answers. And you could see on the bottom 2 hours and 14 minutes. There we go. Okay, so here you see the timeline. So fall 2022, there were full-length practice tests available on College Board. Spring of 23, digital SAT offered internationally. Fall of 23, this past fall, we had our digital PSAT test. And spring of 24, the digital SAT is offered in the US. So that's our March test coming up. So now we'll talk a little bit about what is changing on the test and what is staying the same. So what's staying the same? Still a scoring scale of 400 to 1600. There are still 2 reading and writing sections and 2 math sections. There is no essay section on the test. The questions are still multiple choice with some student-generated response, again, like those grid-in questions in math. Knowledge and skills tested are still the same. So again, that's what's staying the same. Now, what's changing? As I said before, the digital SAT will be about 45 minutes shorter than our current test. The test will be adaptive and fully digital, so the student will use their own device. The reading passages will be shorter and unique to each question, cover more subject areas. The writing will not be in a separate section. Again, that means the reading and writing questions will be mixed. Writing meaning grammar focused questions. Both math sections will now allow calculator, which previously there was a section on the SAT with no calculator. The math will have a heavier emphasis on geometry and trigonometry. Okay, so digital first paper reading writing section. This goes a little more in depth, so take a moment to look at this chart. You can see in the column all the way to the left, the digital SAT combined reading and writing section. It's showing you how many questions are total, the total time, the time per question, question types, as well as the passage subjects. You could see on the right-hand side, those 2 columns are showing you what the reading section was and what the writing section was on the paper SAT test. Now, you'll notice on that bottom column, the passage subjects. Digital SAT does have poetry, whereas it didn't in the past have the poetry as well. You could see as well 71 seconds for time per question, whereas on the reading section on the paper pencil, that was an average of 75 seconds per question, writing 48 seconds per question. So now if we take a look at the math, doing the same thing. So total number of questions, 44, as opposed to 58 on the paper pencil. You can see the total time is 70 minutes as opposed to the 80. Time per question, about 95 seconds per question as opposed to 83 per question. Then you could see the breakdown of modules 1 and 2, as well as the question types and the subjects for the word problems. Just take a moment, look at this chart. Okay, so how will the math section change? Going a little more in depth. Question types, multiple choice, pretty similar, 75% now versus the 78%. Student generated response, 25% now versus 22%. Big difference is, again, the graphing calculator being allowed on both sections now. And a lot of people ask, do I bring my own calculator? Students can bring their own or use the built-in calculator on the digital SAT. Now, in terms of the geometry, I touched on this before, there will be more geometry and trigonometry. Each module now will have at least 5 to 7 geometry questions. Trigonometry will be in the advanced math section, which is now 30% of the test. And for your time per question, there's an average of 12 more seconds per question. as the student is taking the test. Okay, so in terms of who should take the digital SAT, now the last paper pencil SAT just occurred. So anybody now, you see the class of 24, 25, 26 and younger. So class of 2026 and younger are going to be taking the digital SAT test. The class of 2024 was paper pencil. It's really this class of 2025 where some students just took the December test. They may decide they're happy with their score and they won't take the digital test. There are going to be other students who maybe haven't taken the SAT yet and are taking it, or maybe they want to try the test again and they will take digital SAT. Okay, so here again, this is for sophomores who or juniors who may have finalized their scores this past test. And this slide, so do I need to take the SAT if the school is test optional? This comes up a lot. Now, test optional is a misleading headline. SAT scores provide an admissions advantage at some schools. The admission rate is twice as high for students applying with scores than without. If you take a look at the graph on the right-hand side, it's just showing some really selective schools. The blue bar is showing the acceptance rate overall. Red bar is the acceptance rate with submitting the scores. And the teal bar is showing acceptance rate without submitting the scores. So the line optional isn't really optional, just means that all colleges these days are very selective. And submitting a score within the school's range will differentiate you and will increase your chances of getting into the school. Schools are also starting to require the SAT and ACT again, and you could look at specific colleges' websites for their policy, whether they be test optional or not. So this is just a slide about what C2 does, that we do have our own digital SAT book. We do have our own digital SAT diagnostic tests as well. So if anyone on this call did want to schedule a free diagnostic test just to see how you'd like to do how you would do on the digital SAT, you can contact me after. And that is the end of the presentation, but I will open it up to questions.